Hey everyone, welcome back to the Control Group. There's a claim you've probably heard, especially online, especially in wellness spaces, that food is the root of all disease. Not a contributor, not a risk factor, the root. At first glance, this idea feels powerful. It feels intuitive. It gives us something concrete to point to. And because of the characteristics of that idea, I don't want to dismiss it entirely. I want to examine it very carefully. What does the science actually say? Where does this belief come from? Where does it hold up? And importantly, where does it break down? Let's walk through the evidence together. Okay guys, quick disclaimer before we begin. I am not a physician and I am not a scientist. I'm someone who reads clinical research and biomedical research and tries to understand it honestly. Then synthesize what we know, what I understand, and what we don't know, and what I don't know, and what I don't understand. Nothing in this video is intended to be advice. Please feel free to fact check everything I say. If you see a discrepancy between what I present and the literature you know of, or your experiences, I want to hear about that. Okay, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's examine if food really is the root to all disease. The notion that food is the root of all disease didn't come out of nowhere. It grew out of real observations. Over the past century, we've seen a dramatic increase in conditions like obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and even certain cancers. At the same time, that diets have shifted towards higher calorie density and more ultra-processed foods. When two trends rise together, the human brain does what it's very good at. It connects them. Food is something we interact with multiple times every day. Unlike genetics or environmental exposures, it feels controllable, in a word. And psychologically, that matters, and it matters a lot. If disease is rooted in food, then health feels achievable through willpower, discipline, and the right grocery list. In functional medicine and wellness spaces, this idea often becomes more absolute, that chronic disease is fundamentally driven by dietary inflammation, gut dysfunction, or toxicity from modern foods. That framing resonates because it explains this very complex issue with a single lever. The problem isn't that food matters. The problem is when complexity gets flattened into certainty. To fairly evaluate this claim, we need to acknowledge something important. From a biological standpoint, food does matter, and like I said earlier, it matters a lot. Every time we eat, we trigger metabolic signaling. Glucose enters the bloodstream. Insulin then responds. Fat storage and release are then regulated. Cellular energy pathways activate. This matters because these signals repeat thousands of times per year. Expand that over decades, small differences in signaling can accumulate into meaningful physiological changes. And we have evidence that diet also influences immune signaling. Certain dietary patterns are associated with higher levels of inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. This is a relationship explored in large population studies such as those published in the New England Journal of Medicine by Darush Mazafarian and colleagues. This matters because chronic low-grade inflammation doesn't cause disease by itself, but it can lower the threshold for disease expression. Food shapes the gut microbiome, which interacts with immune cells, metabolic pathways, and even neurological signaling. This matters because it helps explain why diet can affect symptoms and disease trajectory without being the original cause. Food affects hormones like insulin, leptin, ghrelin, and cortisol, all of which influence appetite, stress, and energy balance. And emerging research suggests diet interacts with the gut-brain axis, influencing how we feel, not just what labs show. Biologically, the argument isn't nonsense. Food has wide-ranging effects, but influence is not the same thing as origin. Cancer is where this claim starts to break down most clearly, because cancer forces us to confront what disease actually is at the cellular level. You see, at its core, cancer is a disease of accumulated genetic mutations. These mutations disrupt genes that control things like cell division, DNA repair, and program cell death. This matters because these mutations can arise even in the absence of dietary influence. Mutations occur through things like random DNA replication errors, environmental exposures such as tobacco smoke, radiation, viral integration, and inherited genetic variants. This is important to know because none of these mechanisms require food as a primary driver. Now, to be fair, diet may influence cancer progression by shaping metabolic and inflammatory environments, but it does not initiate cancer in the way mutations do. In 2018, the World Cancer Research Fund published a comprehensive synthesis evaluating diet, physical activity, and cancer risk across thousands of studies. Their conclusion was careful and precise: that diet modifies risk for specific cancers, often in interaction with body fatness and physical activity, not as a universal root cause. If food caused cancer outright, oncology would mostly be about meal plans. It is very much not about meal plans. Autoimmune disease shows a similar pattern: strong interaction, but not origin. Autoimmune diseases are often cited as proof that food is the root of disease, and this is where the argument gets more nuanced. Autoimmune disease occurs when the immune system mistakenly targets the body's own tissues. This involves breakdowns in immune tolerance, processes heavily influenced by genetics. Twin and family studies consistently show strong heritability in conditions like type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. Evidence summarized in Nature Reviews Rheumatology by Christina Hedrick. This matters because genetics set the stage before diet enters the picture. Diet can influence symptom severity, inflammation, and flare frequency, but it does not explain why the immune system loses tolerance in the first place. When people say food causes autoimmune disease, what they're often really observing is that changing diet improves symptoms. That experience is real, but improvement is not the same as causation. So if food isn't the root of all disease, what is? Most diseases don't have a single root. They emerge from overlapping layers, things like genetics, environment, behavior, chance, and time. Heart disease involves lipid metabolism, inflammation, vascular biology, and genetics. Cancer involves genomic instability and environmental exposures. Autoimmune disease involves immune dysregulation, layered on genetic susceptibility. When we reduce disease to a single cause, we misinform patients, create false certainty, and sometimes delay effective treatment. So what's the responsible takeaway? No surprise here, but the evidence supports a middle ground. And it's less dramatic, but more honest. Diet influences risk, progression, and symptom burden. Healthy dietary patterns are associated with better long-term outcomes across populations. But diet is not a universal root cause. This framing empowers people without misleading them. It encourages dietary improvement without promising cures. If I have not gotten my point across yet, food matters, and it matters a lot. But disease is not a morality tale, and biology rarely offers single cause explanations. Understanding that complexity doesn't weaken our choices, it strengthens them. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you found this useful, like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. Please tell me if functional medicine has changed your life, or if you know of a paper or a set of data that does show that maybe functional medicine is onto something with this whole root cause hypothesis. And please, fact check me. If you've read something that challenges what I've presented here, or if you see a gap in the evidence, let's talk about it down below in the comments. That's how this channel works. We learn together. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next one.